Yeah. Anybody wants to introduce themselves? Okay, so let's just break the ice. I'll start by introducing the webinar and like myself. Okay, good morning and good evening. I don't know from wherever you guys are joining. And welcome to today's webinar hosted by Ex-Enabler CEO Prashant Gami. And my name is Himansha. I'm a family member. I'm a part of the family of Ex-Enabler. And like I want to start by giving Prashant's introduction, but let's just wait for a few more minutes for everybody to join, and then we can start with it, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Does any of you have any question, or like you want to say hi? Okay, I guess no.
All right. Can I just fill the room? If you can put in the chat, like, what do you do? Like, if you're working or student, or what role or industry, or what brings you here? Any of you are like working on a startup or thinking of starting a company or anything? If you can put just in the chat room, that will give me a very good idea of like the mix in the room. Thank you.
Okay, so we have Akshay. He's the MD of a startup company for consultation in biotech. We have Saransh. Hello, Saransh. We have Muskan. She works as data analyst. Okay, so Saransh is a college student. Okay. Abhi says he's exploring starting my own business. Okay. Currently, currently CTO at a mid-sized company and MNC. Okay. Bhanu is a business consultant.
Right.
All right, guys. Okay.
Right, let's start so that we can have more time for the question answer later. So I'll
Yeah.
start by sharing my screen and let me know once the screen is visible.
Yes. Yes. Um,
Is it visible?
yeah. Yeah. We can see your screen, Prashant. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So today what we're going to talk about is five most expensive product decisions that founders make before writing the code. Now, what that means is I think most of the startup we make mistake of jumping into writing code straight away without actually understanding what we are building, whether it should be built or not, and if it is to be built, what's the best way to build it, what should be prioritized, what should be built first, what does the market need, and all the groundwork that we need to do. Now, if you just start writing code straight away that, oh, I have an idea, let's start doing it, you're practically building a house without any plan or architecture, and it's more likely to fail, or like more likely to have some serious problems. So let me introduce myself first, why I am the one who should be talking about this. So my first, you can say, startup or a gig or whatever you want to call it, was a very traditional grocery store back in 2011. And what I did is, I came to Australia for a couple of years. I didn't have my PR yet. I was working in IT. So what we did is we bought a rundown grocery store out in Queensland for like $50,000. We pulled together here and there, and we turned that around for 2 years and sold it for $250,000. That was my first taste at how to actually run the business and turn it around, right? And then since then, I have found companies in technology, in product, in services, in various other industries. Like I owned a restaurant before. I ran a company which was accounting and mortgage broking company. I own a indoor playground company. There are three tech businesses that I have founded, and they're going well. Plus X Enabler, which I've been running for more than 15 years now. So series of experience, not only positive ones, there are a lot of failures along the way, and that's what makes the journey interesting, because the learnings often come from failure rather than what goes well. So, and I have held, my career started when mobiles were new. So large part of my technical career was as a lead in mobile development, as a technical lead. The largest team I managed was 150 developers of mobile development, second largest in Australia. So I have experience not only in the startup but in enterprise world, and how things go right or things go wrong. So let's dive in. And as I said, the best lessons come from failure story, not the startup story. So we're going to look at few examples of failed startup and why they failed. So SIP was a company which basically tried to become like Amazon of shipping. So rather than product, is like, okay, you can just go to the website, click off a button, and you can ship anywhere in the world. And that was the idea. The idea was great. It took really well. It, as you can see, it raised $62.1 million investment. But the problem is, didn't have the strong foundation. So the demand went up so quickly that everything fell down. The shipping fell down, the policies fell down, the things were going wrong, and it just lost the market because of that. The reliability was lost. So sometimes unpredictable growth, but like, early market attraction is also not a good thing if you haven't built a strong foundation. And that's why, as I say, you need to think, this is why we are here today. Tradicom is one of my first properly failed product company. It built a really good product for the right market, but like most developers, I thought, okay, I'll build the right product and it will just work. Like, I didn't consider sales and marketing and how I will push to the market. What budget do I need to actually push to the market? I spent around $300,000 on that product. Product was great. It was used by a lot of people to start with, but it never took off from that point because we never had a proper sales and marketing strategy for that. So that's a lesson as well, that even if you compare that to Invoice to Go, which was a comparable project back then, is still going fast and growing in Australian market. So right product, right market, but without the structure of business, you still won't succeed. Cared is one of our clients project, which we help them develop, but also consult them in what to build. But what happened is the founder was very attached to the idea of making an impact, that he forgot that the business need to make money. He raised 200K, did a runway of 2 years, but then he couldn't make any money because the wrong features were actually prioritized, which were great features, but they didn't prioritize the monetization. And that means the money ran out before the product could make the impact that it was supposed to make. So when you are building, although the purpose is very, very important, at the end of the day, business is all about like making money. So if you can't make money, if you can't survive, then the impact will never be made. Muster is a classic example of a technical failure, put it that way. So this is where Muster was more of a small utility app that can do the ad hoc meeting kind of thing, that, hey, I want to go for lunch, anyone? and then it automatically goes through your contact, sees who is around you at that time, and then sends them a notification that, hey, Prashant hasn't bought his lunch today. Anybody want to join Prashant for a lunch? Great idea. It was trying to do the experience of early days of Firebase, which was peer-to-peer chat when internet goes out. The limitation was that the way Android and iOS exposed their low Bluetooth low energy devices back then didn't allow it to happen in the perfect way. So the workaround experience would have worked, but then the product was idealized to the perfection, so it never made it to the market, and we just closed it very early on. So why different startup fails in different way? They're not. So one classic thing is, not all startups are created equal. What does that mean? So if you look at the startup world, you can categorize them in four broad categories. There are first time founders, people who are trying to do the things very first time. They might not have any prior business experience or business background or understanding of it. You might be coming from technical background, business background, marketing, sales, whatever it may be, or particular profession where you saw a need and you want to do it. Experienced founders, like founders who have done this before, either succeeded or failed, doesn't matter, but they have done the journey before. So they have learned their lesson and now they're ready to apply those lessons and do it better way. Investment big startups, so some ideas from day one, it's a consortium where investor is part of the co-founding team. So they have the investment from day one and they work very differently as well. And then there are corporate big startup, which are more corporate ventures, or they want to experiment that, okay, there's a market need, but let's do it as a separate business. Now, what are the key differences in all of that? So let's look at first time founders. They're very emotionally invested, they're very attached to the product. They can get, like, really picky about what to do, how to do it. They can sometimes micromanage things, and they can focus on vanity metrics rather than the money, rather than, okay, yeah, they're more worried about, okay, yeah, if the code is done correctly, or if this is done correctly, or if this is happening properly, rather than getting the outcome. So sometimes they get process focused over outcome focused, or how it feels to run a business rather than how the business is running. So they can get more subjective over being objective. um, but they have advantages as well, because if you look at the most successful companies like Apple, Google, or anyone, they were willing to challenge the convention. And the founders, first time founders, are often passionate. They don't take no for an answer. They're very passionate. They're willing to go and break that glass ceiling. um, the problem is sometimes, and many times, they can burn out very quickly because they are going full force for too long, and without the structure or without the support of other founders, it can take its toll. So and the learning curve of running a business is very, very high. It's not just about building. There's a famous quote that if you love cooking, never run a restaurant. What that means is that if you run a restaurant, 80% of the time will be in managing the restaurant rather than actually cooking. So if you are only opening the restaurant because you love cooking, you're probably doing the wrong thing. You should be doing restaurant because you like running the business and you want the experience to be good food. That's the reason you should be doing it. Now, experienced founders have learned that lesson. So when they do it again, they go with the structure like we are doing here. So Tradicom failed, but that didn't stop us. What we did is we learned our lesson that business is more than just code, more than just technology. It needs sales, it needs marketing, it needs structure, it needs money, and it needs a runway and a very pragmatic view where that money gonna come from. So when we are doing new businesses today, they're done in a much more structured way. We have CFO advisors from day one. We have marketing plans from day one. We do the all the 5 steps that I'm going to talk about today before we actually decide that whether we want to do that business or not. And then they are focused on building a stable team, because team is everything. If you don't have the right people, doesn't matter how good your idea is, you will burn out because it takes a toll. So you need the right team, right people at the right position to make your vision go long. And experienced founders have learned that. They have their built-in network because their failed startup or their past experience have allowed them to expose to people who are like-minded, who shares the same vision, who also have a grit to go long way, and they can piggyback on that, and they can attract more investment. If you are planning to do a startup, and if you ever plan to raise money for that, one key thing that you will always need is the right team. Doesn't matter how good the product or anything is, if you don't have the right team, investors are likely to shy away from that. So make sure that team is the most important ingredient. The problem with experienced founder is they're more likely to repeat the same mistake that they did before without knowing. So they may have the same assumption that they will apply. So sometimes they're attached to blaming the external factor rather than internalizing that I was actually doing it wrong and I need to do it differently. So they're prone to do that same mistake again as well. Investment big startup, again, it's a very different thing because you have money from day one. So you're not really kind of worried to make money too early, but at the same time, because you have invested, they will be very money demanding, and that means the growth will be very accelerated and it will be scale oriented. The results will be expected very quickly, very fast, and accurately. So it will be a very fast paced environment. Everything will be measured, and accountability will be there to the board members who are putting the money in, that when are you going to make money, how are you going to make money, how much money you're going to make. So what the problem advantage you got is, because of the talent, you can attract the right people, you can acquire the right talent into the business, but at the same time you might be very aggressive and you might risk the misalignment. So because you are too busy doing stuff, sometimes you forget to step back and think that whether I should be doing that or not. And then there are corporate backed startups. Now, corporate backed startup is almost like a child with a very strict parent. All right. So what happens is, there is obviously an idea, and there is a need for that idea because corporate has identified that, and that's the only reason they might have allowed that funding to go to a business. But they are strategically aligned with the parent company in most cases. So a classic example is a domain site is doing a venture in a listing site. So what happens is that the house domain site obviously is interested in listing site, but all the decisions are made for the listing side are now aligned strategically to the parent company. So the decisions sometimes get slower because everything has to run to the parent company, and then risk has to manage. So startups have a key advantage of agility. Corporate startups sometimes mistake that agility with, risk. So what happens is that it becomes slower and very risk adverse, and everything is done in a corporate way, which can kill the startup. But the benefit is, if they get it right, the channels are already established. So if they get the problem solving right, it can connect to all the corporate partners and all the other companies that corporate is associated with, and it can scale up very quickly. All right. Um, Classic example of a successful corporate backed startup, AWS. AWS was built part of Amazon problem, and then it was separated out in a separate company, and it is doing really, really well. And it has managed to remain independent in terms of their growth compared to Amazon. So that's a classic example of a successful corporate backed startup. All right. Now let's look at what are the 5 decisions that you need to make. So number 1, problem, not idea. Have you actually taken time to define what problem your business will solve? And I keep repeating the term business rather than startup or product, because startup has become this this cool thing that people want to be part of, right? But at the end of day, every startup is a business. So calling it a business changes the perspective, I believe, because when you are in startup, most of the time people talk about, oh, how much have you raised, how much money did you raise. Raising money is not the indicator of success. Revenue is the indicator of success, and that narrative has to change, because most of the startups die because they chase the investment and not the revenue, and they die early on, right? So first thing you need to do is define your problem clearly. Not an idea, not a solution. Don't jump to solution. Stay with the problem clearly, and for that, do the market research. And I love this phrase. I actually wanted a t-shirt with that phrase. I will Google before I ask stupid question. But what I mean is that I will do my market research. You will be surprised how many calls I take where someone has an idea and they start speaking, and I'm like, yeah, you're talking about this product. You're talking about this product that I know. I was like, no, 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 it's different. I was like, go and Google it. It's exactly that. All right. So just basic Google search of idea, not your product, because your product doesn't exist, but the problem and the market research of how are people doing this right now. What are the ways? So think of Henry Ford, right? When he wanted to do a car, nobody did the make the car before. So you can argue that he cannot do market research, but people were traveling before that, so he can still do the analysis of, okay, how do people travel, what modes do they use, what are the, how long does it take to travel, what is the cost of traveling. There are valid questions that you can still ask and see if your solution actually improves that. And to do that, you either know the industry, you are coming from the industry, or you have to talk to the actual customers. Not surveys, not just like, oh, I did Google search and I went to Reddit and all that. You need to talk to actual customers to validate that the problem that you are trying to solve is large enough. And sell before you build. You need to establish that, okay, can you, yes, you can build it, yes, you can solve the problem, but can you make money out of that? The one litmus test that every business idea has to pass is that can your solution be sold and people are willing to pay for that solution, and you have enough margin in that sell. If you can sell at a cost price, good luck, you will make great impact, no money, and you will die. So sell before you build, what that means is establish the proposition of sell before you start building. And to do that, measure actions, not compliments. People talk nice thing. So there's a classic saying, if you need money, ask for advice. If you need advice, ask for money. So the only people whose advice matters is if they are willing to put their money on what they are saying. So let's dive deeper into each of this. What do you mean by problem, not idea? So have you taken time to clearly define the problem that you are trying to solve? Let me go back to Henry Ford example. You may say, okay, he had an idea that, okay, there can be a car, but that's not the problem that he was solving. The problem he was solving is it takes too long for people to travel from one place to other place. Now, is the problem significant enough? If the current solutions are not fast enough or not good enough, can his solution be much better than the original solution? So, but to get to that part, you need to start with the problem. So here is an example. So if you are building nowadays, I can tell you, like in last 2 years, I had at least 15 inquiries of building a CRM for fitness coaches, diet coaches, and all the coaching industry, right? But people come with saying, we will build an app for fitness coaches. Great, but why? Why do you want to build? What is significant problem that you are solving? So you can define the problem by saying fitness coaches with the team of fewer than 5 people use multiple platforms to serve their customers, creating a fragmented user experience and a high manual management cost. Now, this is a clear problem. There's a clear market size here. that you are targeting people who are a team of less than five. You're not targeting the big coaching businesses and things like that. You are targeting individual or a small team of coaches. What is the problem? That they have to use multiple platforms. They might have to use Notion, they might have to use Stripe or something for the payment, they might have to use Shopify or something to sell the product. They use like 10 different platforms to serve a customer, and managing between those platforms, a fragmented, but b, it is very manual labor, because you need to now manage on multiple platform, make sure everything runs fine and all that. That's a problem. Now once you identify that problem, then the actual market research and validation and how big the problem is, what the price should be, all that comes into picture. So a classic gold standard in startup world has always been Airbnb pitch. And what was the Airbnb's problem statement in that pitch? So Airbnb's pitch was, finding local affordable accommodation is hard, and spare house rooms do not generate enough income. So as you can see, because it's a two-way marketplace, the problem is twofold. Now, where Airbnb started was, particularly in California, where it was, what they identified it that all the hotels near to the conference area were booked during the conference time. All right, and there was a rush period, but there was not enough accommodation available, and it was very costly. People are already paying for the conference and all that, and people who are visiting, it's very hard to find the right accommodation, local experience, and all that. And to identify and validate that problem, the founders actually didn't start building. They, to establish the problem statement, what they did is they made a landing page and said, we need 100 hosts who will host us for a week or something, and they will go and actually stay at these 100 houses. And each time they went to different houses, they talked to the people saying, why are you renting this? Why are you willing to rent this? What is the main thing that you want from the guest? Like, hospitality, if you want, like, guests to be respectful and all of that. So understanding both side of proposition is very, very important. So define your problem clearly. Here is another example of, will build booking site for hotels. Now, this may sound silly in this 2026, but in 2012 and even 2007, when internet became popular, there were multiple listing sites. They were coming on booking.com and all of that. Hotels had this changed landscape. People were not calling the hotel directly. They were going online, they were searching it. But what is the problem that you have to identify? Because it's such a large ecosystem. There is a listing site, there is a management of booking, there's a management of, like, what rooms are available, what rooms are not, and all that. So to narrow down the problem that one company narrowed down is, hotels find it difficult to manage listing across multiple booking sites, and most of them don't have a direct booking form on their site. What that means is they pay out the commission to the booking sites all the time, because they don't have a website with the booking form, and that means they don't have a direct booking available in the online channel. So how do you solve that problem, right? And their one sentence of selling was, your one big booking button on your website. That was the only thing they sold. There were number of services underneath that they provided, but the tagline was this one line. And today that company is valued close to $1 billion, right? Anybody know this company? I don't know. You guys are too young, so I'm not sure. But does anyone know which company or which type of company I'm talking about?
If anybody has any idea, you guys can drop it in the chat box as well.
Yeah. So the company is called SiteMender. Now, today there are a number of other companies that do the same thing. So what they do, we call it the hotel aggregator. What that means is they will API into all the booking sites, and hotel has only one interface to put their facility on. and then put their rooms, and then it manages behind the scene all the listing. And if room is booked on one facility, it gets updated everywhere. It also provides obviously the booking form on your website. So this became a very successful business. And today, if you see even US alone, there are many companies who do that similar thing. But identifying that one clear problem can give you the edge. And the beauty about this company is it was started by a couple of people only, and it grew to a valuation of close to $1 billion, which is very rare for such a small team. And that's why this company was uniquely identified as successful startup, right? So let's go to the next step. I will Google before I code. And like I said, typically the answer that I hear from founders when I say, all right, have you done any market research? What have you identified? Where is the data? They say, oh, my idea is so unique, it has never been done before. Or like, this never this does not exist. So there's no data that we can compare, or there's no site that we can compare, or there's no solution we can compare. The other mistake that they do is they compare the solutions rather than taking time to understand the problem and whether that those solutions directly associated with the problem that they are solving, right? So classic case of SiteMinder, you can say that okay, the listing sites are the problem. But that's not the problem that the SiteMinder is solving. It is solving the problem for the hotel itself, not for the booking website. So identifying your clearly defining your problem helps you understand what your business is competing against and what are the current workaround, what is the ways currently it is managed. So what you can do instead is, if you have identified the correct problem, there should be enough people talking about that problem. So one of our current startup is called Gia. Gia is a dementia behavior management app. It's basically a companion app which allows you to basically gives you a suggestion of how to deal with behavior issues of dementia, because people forget, and because of that they get cranky, they get this and all that. But the problem that it solves is that because dementia affects the behavior of a person, the carers have high time understanding the behavior and why that behavior is occurring, and that causes a lot of the problems on top of that, right? So although dementia is quite newly developing area in AI field, and there are not many solutions around the world. In fact, when we did the search, there are only 3 companies around the world which are actually trying to work in this particular area. But the problem, if you talk about it, literally everyone in the aged care industry who is working as a carer, as a owner of the aged care homes, or taking care of someone who is dementia, every single person identified this same problem and they need help. And the current workarounds are very slow, very bureaucratic, and very expensive. So if you have identified a problem, there should be number of people with that problem, and there should be workarounds. Your solution does not exist, but the workarounds, how are people dealing with that problem right now? So they might be going to chat gpt, or they might be googling about it, they might be going to Facebook groups to talk about it, they might be going to Reddit, they might be talking to experts. What are the channels, what kind of information do they get, is the quality of information not good enough that your solution is required, which is very important. Because if you look at startup landscape, 70% of the startup are worse than Excel sheet. And that's the reality of startup, because people get attached to the idea and they forget that the current workarounds are good enough. You don't need a very sophisticated solution for this, because it works. People are not happy to pay for something that is very small problem, and they're happy with the workaround. So even though solution might not exist, there might be workaround that people use. And a successful business need to solve a problem that is large enough and significant enough to monetize clearly. What that means is, if people can get away by using Excel sheet or chat GPT, will they be willing to pay for your solution? If you can't establish that, then you should rethink. And that's where the next thing comes is talk to the customers. Now, when you are talking to the customers, do not start with the solution. Customers are not great at defining what they want or what solution do they want. And again, going back to Henry Ford example, if I ask people what they want, they would have said faster horses, because nobody even imagined that something like car can exist. All right. So if you start talking to customers about the solution directly, they are not the right people to tell you that that solution is the right solution or not. It's your job. Don't make them do your job. But what they can define clearly is what problem they are facing, how significant that problem is. And if you solve that problem, are they willing to pay for it or not? All right. Now, most important thing is, because sometimes people say, oh, my customers don't know. They are the only stakeholders who are paying you money. So their voices matter the most. If they don't know, that's okay, but they should know the problem enough. They should know that, okay, if that problem is solved for them, what's the value to them and how much they are willing to pay for that value. So, and to do that, you can use something called a watering hole technique. What that means is, in the olden days, everybody used to gather around watering hole because that's the only source of water. And the principle is that find an environment where customers are free to talk about their problem. They have the trust factor, because watering hole also represents the trust. That if everybody is at the watering hole, they know that they will not hunt each other. They were like unsaid rule, right? That if you are at the watering hole, nobody can hunt around the watering hole. So it's a trusted environment where people are happy to talk about their problems. If you go and door knock people, they're not likely to tell you their problem. But if you meet them through a friend or something, they're more likely to tell you that whether they face that problem or not. So the trust, establishment of trust in the environment is very, very important. And this is where a lesson from a failed startup can help. So Tradicom, which I mentioned, was targeting all the tradies, which is plumbers or all the service people. Now, what we were doing was creating an app that basically allows them to manage the job easily, route them, and then invoice them. And to talk about that problem, uh, we tried calling them. We tried, like, going to where they are working and all that. No luck. Where did we actually got luck in talking to those people was actually Sunday soccer team practices. They are stuck at 1.5 hours at the soccer practice of their children, where they have nothing else to do. And for a case of beer, you can talk to 20 people and they will be more than happy to spend time with you. So use the, use the environment where there is trust, because sports ground are very friendly sports, and they are free, they have time, they're happy to talk about it things, and that's where the people can talk about problems they are facing and how they are solving it right now, right? So you can focus where people are happy to talk about problems. Go to Reddit forums, go to Discord channels, go to Slack channels, go to Quora, go to Facebook groups, go where people are actually talking about problem, and don't propose your solution. Just try to understand, narrow down the problem, and define them in a clear metric that these many people are suffering from this. Like, you talk to 100 people, these many people had that same problem. 20 of them use this workaround, 30 of them use this workaround. This is the quantification, this is the quality of the problem, and if it is costing this much. So I have a very objective, clearly defined metrics to actually identify and quantify the finding that you did from the customers. And then you can basically go and experiment how your solution will impact. So, and use direct channels where possible, and use both online as offline avenues, as I said. So now that you talk to your customers, coming back to the drawing board and say, all right, we identified there's a problem. We identified there is a significant enough problem. There is enough people. So you're not going to target the entire audience, right? So how many people you can actually reach out and sell it to, and make money? Is there large enough audience? Is there significant enough problem? And is your problem actually going to be sophisticated enough to make money? People will be actually able to pay that, and how much they would be willing to pay. $100, $50 a month, one-off cost. Don't get sucked into as a service model all the time. Define that what is the best way to solve and sell this thing. I'll give you an example. 2 years ago, I was mentoring this one person who was trying to build a kind of like a memory book of children, right? So what it does is kind of like a slam book. It has the series of significant events that occur in the first 5 years, and then it sends you a reminder that, hey, make sure you take the photo of when they start eat their first food, or make sure take the photo when they start walking, and then collect it together and share it with the family. Now, the way they described the pricing model was subscription. I said, okay, they will pay subscription for first 2 years when they're excited and their parents, young parents. What happens after that? When they want to stop, being that diligent, or they have second kid, they got busy. Now they have cost on their monthly plan. How will you do it? So in that scenario, the pricing model of one-off cost or per usage cost, or a different pricing model rather than ongoing subscription, is a better way. Or you pay the subscription when you want to use it, but at the end of subscription, you have a way to download that slam book in a printable way, in a PDF or whatever, so that you can end the transaction. Now, without that, it feels like an ongoing cost and more like a lockdown scenario. So your pricing strategy should also consider the customer problem, but the solution in the value of the solution. And you can test that by getting customer to pre-sign up, join the wait list. You can create landing pages or provide that service manually. Initially, for example, if you are doing a two-way marketplace, try to do it manually. Just put the landing page up and see if you can sell the services before it happens. Classic case is, there's a franchisee here which grew from like one person. It is a lawn mowing franchisee. The way they did it is basically they said, all right, let's see if we can convert lawn mowing business into franchisee, right? So what they did is they created a landing page where you can book service of lawn mowing from anywhere in Australia. They didn't have any franchisor. They didn't have anyone who can service that. But they took the inquiry, and when the inquiry came, they contacted a local lawn mower and then got them to do the job. They didn't make any money on that, but they established that how much traffic they can generate and do their services, and then how much they can charge for it, and what's the commission they can get between the actual service provider and the listing service. So even without actually having a formal business, you can still establish the validate your problem. And there are ways to validate that. Use them. All right. Don't stick to that unless there is an app available, unless I can finish my solution, I cannot provide that service. You might not make money, but you will clearly identify who is willing to pay and how much they are willing to pay. So try to get that done early, and try to do it in a manual way, or not perfect way, and get started. And the last thing is measure actions, not compliments. So if you, for example, if you go and take feedback and say, all right, could you use this feature? Do you think this will help you? People will always likely to say yes, because they don't want to be rude. They don't want to give like negative impression and so on. So compliments are everywhere, but unless they are willing to pay, unless they are the actual buyers, potential buyers, their voices does not matter as much. because your business need real customers to survive. All right. And to do that, you need to measure progress in the actions. How to do that? Let's have a look at that. So fake door strategy. As we said, like, sometimes people create the sign up page with the actual pricing and all of that. And then when someone says, all right, view plans, use buy this or sign up for this, what you get is that, hey, our we are not servicing your area at the moment. We have taken your details and we'll get back to you. Or sometimes they see, like, okay, which like how far that pre-sign up can go, the landing page can go, what pricing people are actually clicking. They can do A/B testing between the pricing. So there are a lot of ways you can build those fake doors and test those services and see if there is demand for it, if people are willing to pay that much. And you can basically see basically catalog that action by region, by who is actually coming up, what type of people are coming up that matches the ICP that you define, or is it a wrong ICP. It gives you that. Pre-order or paid wait list is a classic example. So there was a company here that wanted to do a charity of socks. So what they would do is that buy charity socks. And to do that, they made a landing page. They said that, okay, you will pay this much for socks and all the money will go to charity. They took like 100 orders, and then they went and actually got, like, bought the socks from a local shop and then got them printed and shipped them before they started manufacturing the actual socks. But they proved that, okay, there are people who would be wearing charity socks and it can work. Today, most of the corporate CEOs wearing those socks. But the way they started is they identified and measured the outcome before they started the business itself. All right. You can start putting the ads out in Google or social media and all that, and see how many people actually click, how much engagement do you get, how many active inquiries do you get. That's a very good understanding of like whether there is a demand, where is and then you can provide the fake kind of pricing and all of that, and see if people are happy with that pricing. And so you can do those quantitative as well as qualitative research, but stick to the data. Like, let the data tell you whether that idea is worth doing or not just people. Like, don't ask for as I said, if you need money, ask for advice. If you need advice, ask for money. So unless people are happy to put the money where their mouth is, their advice does not matter. All right. So be very pragmatic about that. That's basically the 5 checks. Once you are done through that, you have established the valid problem statement. You have understand the very particular problem that you are solving. You have established that there is enough large market for it. People are willing to pay money for that solution, and by charging that much, you can make money in the process. Now you can start building. So in the next webinar, we will be covering how to actually do the building. All right. So how to build your MVP, minimum viable product, and launch, which is very, very important, launch, because I can tell you countless example of startups that built and never launched. All right. So stay tuned, and if you have any questions, we'll take any questions now.
Thank you so much, Prashant. Now, like, we can start taking up the questions. If you guys have any questions, please drop it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourselves and ask that. Thank you, Akshay.
So I'll take one. Great presentation. Many of us just think and never put, that thought into action. So this is good guidelines to put the thoughts into action.
Great.
For a business, how much important the marketing strategy is, especially should you think about marketing when you are thinking about the idea?
So yes, the small answer is yes, always, but it depends on the type of business. So let me give you example of all the businesses that I'm currently doing. So GIA, which is the dementia management, dementia support kind of chat GPT. Now for that tool, there are two sides of the tool. One is B2C for at-home carers who take care of their moms or relatives or someone who has dementia. The other side is the aged care homes. Now, the aged care home sell is a very sales heavy exercise. It does need marketing, but it only needs marketing for recognition of the brand. So all the awards that we won, or HIPAA compliance that we did, or like anything that we achieved, the research partnership that we did, or research result, we only establish those results, but the major part goes into the heavy legwork of like going to old age care, presenting the product and all that, and then getting the contracts, because contracts are high value. They don't just purchase based on good marketing. They need person, they need to establish that trust and all that. So in that case, the marketing gives you only brand value, but not the actual sale. Versus B2C side is completely marketing driven. You can't go and door knock everyone. So the only reliable source of establishing the sale is marketing. So B2C side is heavily marketed. So depending on your idea, yes, you need marketing, but what are the outcomes of the marketing that you require, and how much sales exercise or BDM exercise does it require will differ. X enabler is a classic example. Like, this is also one form of marketing, but it does not give us sales. We are not expecting anything. But what it gives is that our voice, what our value, what our views are reaching out to people. And then once that is established, we can then take a step back and do the BDM exercise. So when people know about X enabler, or when they talk about us, they find like, videos online, they say, oh yeah, I resonate with what you said.
That's good.
Hope that
Thank
makes
you.
sense.
It does.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to? Okay.
Uh, yeah. So can I ask?
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when we talk about like strategizing things before getting to development or working on the product, launching it. So like, what is the full stop? Where do we like take a full stop? Like we are done with the strategizing part. Like suppose, for example, if we are taking customer feedback,
Yep.
these are the number of customers that we want. Like we have asked
Yes.
100 customers. Is it enough?
Yep.
Like what if we get some
And
new insight in 101st, like
yep.
above 100? So that's what I want to know.
So the right number is when you think the insights are enough. And I know it's a very subjective answer. So let's objectify it. Typically, you need to have customer persona defined, that, okay, these are my like the buyers that I think, frustrated Fred versus expert Amy and whatever it may be. Now, when you talk to enough people, and typically there are 10 to 15, when you start seeing the repetitive answer, you have talked to enough people, all right, directly. You can still run surveys, you can still keep the waiting list and marketing and like A/B testing open, but to get the actual customer feedback, you need to talk to at least 3 to 4 people of each persona that you identified, and those persona need to be generalized enough that there is a, let's say, care workers, like aged care workers. You can see, okay, the care workers are typical persona. So if you talk to 10 care workers and they all say, yes, there is problem with that and this is what is happening, you have identified that, yeah, this is the problem every carer is facing, because you start seeing that repetitive patterns. So once you start seeing repetitive patterns, stop, you have done enough, all right. And for sales and strategy, you can keep the doors open, but as long as there are a couple of orders that comes through and they're happy with the pricing, I think you have established that your pricing and all those strategies are right. Now, there are a couple of questions that came from chat. We'll probably take that as well. So others is asking, when taking feedback from people before building products, some of them might say, this is a great idea. So I just want to know, how do you know if people actually pay for you? That's, I think, the gist of the presentation. Others, do not talk about your solution, because if you talk about your solution, you are taking a prejudiced answer, and people don't want to be rude. If you ask them, will you use this feature, they're most likely to say yes, all right. But talk about the problem that they have. So I'll give you a classic example. When we come on a higher value sale, like typical problem of typical product that you sell are like, couple of $100, and it's easy to establish whether people pay for not. For us, the typical pricing is 100,000 or above. So people not going to tell you that, okay, yeah, we're going to pay or not. So what we do is, when we go on a sales or a sales call to start with, what we say is, okay, what are you trying to do? And then what we ask is that, how significant is the problem? By not solving this problem, what is the cost to your business? All right. So if they say, all right, yeah, if we don't have an app, we got like, 15 customers who asked for this, but we didn't have that. If we have an app, we can convert those 15 customers and that will bring us a revenue of 300,000. Then we can say, all right, so that's the initial market, and there is total market of like, 100 customers that you can do. So you can spend $100,000 in creating an app to establish the market, because you all have a clear ROI the day the app is launched. So that's how you get to the, like, whether they actually pay for the, what is the value to them. So if you cannot establish the value to them in the conversation, your pricing will come later. But your pricing, what pricing works for your business, they will never be able to answer that. What you need to answer is that, what is the problem? Is it significant enough? And if the problem is solved, what is the value that will bring to them? And how urgent is to solve that problem? So Panadol versus vitamin theory. Are you selling vitamins or Panadol? If someone is having a headache and you are selling Panadol, they are more likely to buy. But if someone is like, gonna get healthier in 3 years time, it's a harder sell. So if your sell is solves the urgent problem, then it's easier to sell. If you are selling an improvement product, then you need to sell the story. You can sell the dream, the output. Like fitness guys, they never sell you, oh, you're gonna be able to do like 10 push-ups. Nobody wants to do that. It's painful, right? But what they sell is that, okay, you will be able to go on the beach in your swimsuit. You will have summer body, you will have this. They sell the idea, they sell the dream, and they keep repeating that dream. So depending on the product, you need to do those kind of exercise. Hope that helps. So Muskan is saying, don't feel important right now. They are necessary for overall user experience. So she's asking, even if some pages or features don't feel important right now, they still are necessary for the overall user experience. How to then, very simple question. If you didn't have those features in the first version of your app, will customers still pay? If the answer is yes, those features are optional. Doesn't matter how you think the user experience or anything. And in the next webinar, we will discuss in detail, but classic theory is building a motorbike. If building a motorbike is a startup, you won't have the motorbike in your first version, because the problem you are solving, and going back to Henry Ford example, I think it matches perfectly. What you are solving is the faster transport. So your first version might look like a skateboard, the second one might look like a scooter, the third one might look like a bicycle, and then you will put the engine. So your fourth version might actually look like a motorcycle, and then the user experience will be very different to a skateboard. But that's not the aim. The aim is faster transport. As long as people are willing to use your solution to achieve faster transportation, you are still solving the problem. So don't get attached to the idea that my solution should feel like this only then people will pay, because sometimes you are probably just in your own way. Hope
Yeah.
that, yeah. Sorry,
There's
one more.
Tanushree is asking, so if I create a demo landing page before building the product, wouldn't that be misleading?
Uh, yes and no. So you can be clear that what the landing page is about, what the product gonna be like. All right. Now, when you say misleading, if you take money at that point, yes, that is misleading. If you take someone's $100 and said, yeah, sorry, but I don't have product right now, that's misleading. But if they click through, like, okay, yeah, I'm happy to pay $50, And when they click, okay, yes, select plan of $50, you say, all right, we are currently not serving in your area, or our product is coming up in June. We'll keep you posted or we'll get back to you. It's okay. Like, that's just the inquiry that you did. You are not actually like, yeah, if you take the money and then you don't have product, that's misleading. Don't do that, please. But there were a lot of businesses, I can tell you, a lot of big startups, they only started with a landing page. Facebook started that way. They created this directory on the campus, and that's how Facebook was originally started. So again, it's the same scenario. You get the people. If you can serve them manually, charge them for the manual services. There are multiple ways you can actually solve the problem without having the product ready.
Yep. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions? I think this is it for all the
Yep.
questions and everything.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you
All right.
everyone for joining, and stay tuned for our next webinar, and thank you so much again for taking time.
Let's see you in the next webinar, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.